Hey, AP language students, this is Kevin Steinhauser at Fiveable, and I'm going to walk through today a very important day in terms of argumentation essays. We're going to look at an effective introduction paragraph. So it's really important because it sets the tone for your entire essay. As an AP reader, when I read effective introductions, I am looking forward to reading the body paragraphs. So many times, essays are in a stack of essays. They start to sound the same. The introductions are very bland. And in fact, oftentimes introductions actually do more to hurt a student's essay than to help it. So today I want to look at effective introductions for argumentation essays. The last couple of weeks we've been talking about kind of theoretical big picture. What is argumentation essay looking like? What is it actually assessing? Next week we're going to do a very important, probably the most important session for argumentation. We'll look at an effective body paragraph. That's where you really earn your score. And then the week after, we're actually going to do something different to end the year 2018. On the 18th, we're going to have a live Kahoot session that will be free. So anyone can sign up for it, and we'll just be doing some review to end the semester. So, and next week, we'll be all in probably the two most practical live sessions of the argumentation unit. What does good writing actually look like when it comes to an argumentation essay? So I'm going to launch my PowerPoint. I'll show you some examples of that, of what actually it should be looking like. I call this presentation Take Me on a Journey. So I'm going to show you today one very effective way to shoot for an effective introduction. Now, this is not an automatic, I'm going to score an 8 or a 9 on my essay if I use this. It's something like that at all. Again, we're still earning the majority of our score in our body paragraphs. But again, introductions set the tone for who you are as a writer and as a thinker. So you want to make sure that in a pile of essays, yours stands out. To do that, follow along with this introduction lesson. Next week again will be same time, Tuesday night, writing an effective body paragraph. Before we launch into the introduction itself, I'm going to always start this week and next week with these next couple slides. So just a quick overview of argumentation, the expectations for an argumentation essay. So first, College Board expects you to have an articulate argument. In other words, every single sentence is clear and your argument itself is very clear. There's no extra explanation necessary. You don't need to hand me your paper and say, this is what I meant to say. What you wrote speaks for itself. Second, appropriate evidence. Last week, I introduced the GOPHER acronym, and that's a great one to review. I create all of these live sessions so they're very accessible to watch at any time. So if you're like, hey, I really want to go practice argumentation introduction paragraphs, come on over to this replay. All year long, they'll be posted. Third, most importantly, thorough explanation of how evidence supports your argument. That's where you truly earn your score. And I've said this last week, you can't thoroughly explain if you don't have an articulate, clear position, concrete evidence to back it up. But then once you do, it's all about your explanation. That will be our primary focus next week as we work on body paragraphs together. Then we have 4 and 5, kind of like, not like in order of what you do, but just two other important pieces of what you do as an argumentation writer. So first is you have a nuanced perspective. You don't necessarily just think of the first thing that comes to your mind, but the most complex thought that comes to your mind that you believe in that you can argue. So nuanced perspective, simply put, means I am thinking thoroughly through the topic. I'm looking at it from all angles and points of view. And then I'm developing my position. And then lastly, effective writing style. That's things such as sentence structure, overall organization, grammar, spelling, everything that effective writers do, you should be doing for every AP language essay. I'm going to throw this slide in as well this week and next week because I just want you thinking about how are you going to plan your 50 minutes? How do you want to spend, sorry, not 50, your 40 minutes during a timed live essay? So you have 40 minutes to write an argumentation essay. At least that's the allotted time. Just a reminder, you don't have to, the proctor's not going to say, you must stop essay 1 and begin essay 2. But College Board plans for each essay to be 40 minutes. With that said, here is one maybe best plan or plan A. Maybe try this out and make adjustments for you personally. Here's how I would plan my time, and I think it's very effective for a lot of my students as well. So 6 minutes. This was my first live session a few weeks back on argumentation. Read the prompt, plan your essay. Don't fall into the trap of the prompt. In other words, don't write a pretty good essay on slightly the wrong topic. So take your time and make sure you're actually arguing what you're supposed to be arguing. And again, it doesn't matter what position you take, but it matters that you're talking about the right topic. Then take about 7 minutes to write your intro. That's the time that I recommend. I definitely don't recommend taking much more than 7 minutes. Some of you might be able to crank them out quicker. We're going to spend our live session tonight on introduction paragraphs. But next week's probably the most important for a reason. You earn your score through the body paragraphs. And for 22 minutes, I recommend at least 22 minutes spending writing your body paragraphs. You can write either 2 or 3 really great body paragraphs in that time. Again, I say write 2 or 3 body paragraphs. Quality first, quantity second. In other words, I'd rather have 2 great quality paragraphs, body paragraphs, than 3 that are kind of rushed. So 2 great ones, and if you have time, 3 great ones. I don't recommend having 2 great ones and then a mediocre paragraph. It's better to use that time to really shore up your intro, spend some time on your conclusion, proofread, revise, and the extra minutes just focusing on even making those body paragraphs better. Again, I think it's great if you can have 3, but 2 body paragraphs can get you a great score if they're very effective and very thorough. So last 5 minutes, 3 minutes to write a conclusion paragraph really quickly, and 2 minutes to proofread and revise. I do recommend budgeting time to do that. So again, I'm going to show you this slide next week because I always want you thinking about what is my plan going into the essay. I don't want to spend too long up front, but I also don't want to spend too short up front. Likewise, our session tonight, I don't want to spend too long on the intro, but I do have time that I can budget to make an effective intro and therefore an effective beginning to my essay. So here's the point or the function of an introduction paragraph, and then we'll launch into what it looks like. First and foremost, it sets the tone for the essay. Again, imagine you're a college board reader in a room full of essays. Essays keep coming to you about the same exact topic. And I'm going to show you here in a minute what so many students' introduction paragraphs look like. They, like I said at the beginning, often actually detract from the quality of the essay. So it's important to have an intro. I don't recommend just starting in with your body paragraphs, but have a plan of attack. So I'm going to show you one possible way to go tonight. Second, you clearly introduce the topic of the essay in your introduction. I'll show you how to do that. Third, you clearly state you're the writer, your position on the topic very clearly. It should be in your thesis statement. What do you believe? What are you going to argue? And then just think about it this way. Effective essays will not begin like every other essay. So honestly, the first thing I'm thinking is, how would everyone else in the country begin this essay? Okay, I'm not going to do that. If you sound like everyone else, you don't sound like anyone. All right, a note on timing. The strategy I'm going to show you here in a few minutes, only worry about if you have the time to pull it off and the capability to pull it off in 7 or so minutes. So you have time to dedicate to it. The criteria you definitely need is a solid thesis. So the function, let's go back to the function really quickly. The function is the same no matter how you execute an effective introduction paragraph. My point is you don't have to spend a lot of time or like you don't have to do it my way, I should say, but you should include those pieces of a function. So you should be introducing the topic. You should be clearly stating what you believe. That is non-negotiable. That's what effective intros do. I'll show you here in a couple minutes one cool way to go about it and to ensure that yours rises to the top. Again, you want to spend the majority of your time writing your body paragraph, but you do have time to spend in your introduction paragraph. All right, so again, the second bullet point here, I'm about to show you a strategy that can really help you set the tone for your paper and stand out. But my word of caution is this. Don't go all in on this strategy if it's taking you more than 7 or 8 minutes. So it's a great strategy, but not if it's at the detriment of your body paragraphs. That's still where you want to spend your time. For the rest of the night, I'm going to be looking at a 2018 prompt, so the most recent prompt at the time of this live session. This prompt I will use for my introduction paragraph model that I wrote. All right, so let's look at this prompt really quickly. In her book, Gift from the Sea, author and aviator Anne Morrow Lindbergh writes, "We tend not to choose the unknown, which might be a shock or a disappointment, or simply a little difficult to cope with. And yet, it is the unknown, with all its disappointments and surprises, that is most enriching." Okay, so a lot of times College Board will give you a prompt, a prompt that's broken into pieces. The first piece will be background knowledge or something to think about. And then the last piece will be the prompt. That's exactly how the 2018 prompt looks. So the next piece is our prompt itself. Consider the value Lindbergh places on choosing the unknown. And then write an essay in which you develop your own position on the value of exploring the unknown. Use appropriate specific evidence to illustrate and develop your position. So a couple words on the prompts before we launch into what an effective introduction paragraph should look like. First, for prompts like this, I actually can write the entire essay without mentioning Lindbergh and not get docked for it at all, because the prompt itself says consider Lindbergh, but then write an essay in which you develop your own position. I don't have to say I agree with Lindbergh or I disagree with Lindbergh. I'm just clearly stating my own opinion. You can cite Lindbergh, you don't have to. Second, the trap of this prompt that a lot of people fell into just this last May is talking about the unknown, but not the value of the unknown. So that's what I mean when I say don't fall into the trap. Don't write an essay on slightly the wrong topic. And a lot of students wrote really good essays on what the unknown is. But if you're not saying what's the value of exploring the unknown, then you're not answering the prompt. The most you can get is a 4. Let's look at what so many students do when it comes to introductions. So I did not read the argument prompt in 2018. I talked to people who did. And this is essentially what they said everyone was doing. And when they said everyone was doing it, it's just because it seemed like everyone was doing it, because maybe 9 out of 10 essays started this way. Let's read it. Anne Morrow Lindbergh was an aviator and an author. She wrote that we tend not to choose the unknown. She also said that it is the unknown, with all its disappointments and surprises, that is most enriching. As Lindbergh suggests, exploring the unknown is not only enriching, it is necessary in order to advance as a society. All right, a couple of notes here before we move on, because I think it's actually very important to realize this is what 9 out of 10 students are doing. Let me be different. Let me be better than average. This is actually a case, and so many students are doing it, but this is actually a case where this introduction paragraph is detracting from the overall student writing. This is a weak introduction paragraph. I'll show you an average one next, which some people are doing, and then I'll show you a great one, which very few people, less than 1% are doing. I want you to be in the top 1% if you can pull off the time. So that's what we're doing here tonight. But a couple points on this weak intro. The most common type of intro is the weak intro. The thesis is actually not the problem here. In fact, the thesis is the only sentence in which the student writer is thinking. The first 2 sentences, the student is simply parroting the prompt. In other words, like paraphrasing or copying down word for word some context. This is not the student's context. Therefore, this is not the student thinking. Therefore, it's detracting from the essay. The College Board reader, let's go back to the prompt for a minute, has almost basically memorized these few sentences on the prompt. So hearing it, if it's paraphrased or directly quoted, is not impressive. They already read this many, many times. It's wasting the College Board reader's time to read this introduction. They'll skim through it. I don't mean they're not reading it. I mean, they're reading quickly. They're saying, okay, I've read this 9 times out of the last 10. I read this on the prompt. I'm reading quickly until I can finally find the student's actual thought. Oh, good, I have it in the thesis. So basically, the student paraphrased or quoted a couple sentences and then have a clear thesis. Hey, at least they have a clear thesis, right? But that's the only thing contributing to the writer's essay. Here's another possible weak intro. As Lindbergh suggests, Exploring the unknown is not only enriching, it is necessary in order to advance as a society. And to be completely honest with you, this one sentence introduction paragraph is basically as effective as the one that parrots the prompt, because I have the exact same amount of student thought, this much. So this one, it detracts, and clearly so does the one with just the thesis. But the weak intro that parrots the prompt is a sign of a student who says, I know I should say something before my thesis, but I have nothing to say. Or here, the thesis is like, hey, I'm going to write my thesis and spend the rest of my time in my body paragraphs. That's a problem. Now, you can do this and still earn a qualifying score, still get a 5, 6, maybe even a 7, right? But it's setting the tone as, okay, as a writer, why did you not take up the opportunity to set the tone for your essay? Why did you have that as a wasted opportunity? All right, here's an adequate intro. And hey, if you can pull this off, you'll be fine. I'm going to show you an above adequate intro, and that's where we'll spend most of our time. But let's not rush through this slide, because if this is your intro and you have really great body paragraphs, you will be just fine. So some of you will say, okay, I see what you're saying. You have really effective introductions, and I get why it's effective, and I get why that's great writing, but I can't do that in 7 minutes. Well, this is your fallback plan, and it might depend on the prompt. Some prompts you might be able to use my plan, which I'll show you next. Some prompts you might say, I don't have enough background knowledge, or I have to spend more time to plan my essay. I'm falling back on the adequate intro, recognizing, yeah, my intro is going to be adequate, but my body paragraphs will make up for it. They'll be above adequate. All right, so let's read. This is, I'd say, a very average college level introduction in terms of our purposes here. The unknown can be a scary place. In general, people would rather stay safe within the walls of their comfort zone than venture into the unknown. However, throughout history, exploring the unknown has yielded societal benefits. The bravest men and women, those who are willing to explore the unknown, are the ones who propel our society forward. As Lindbergh suggests, this is the exact same thesis. As Lindbergh suggests, exploring the unknown is not only enriching, it is necessary in order to advance as a society. Same exact thesis. Now again, I can mention Lindbergh, I'm not necessarily getting bonus points for doing that. It just worked really well for this thesis, right? But I did not parrot or just quote or paraphrase the prompt once. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 quick but effective sentences that build up to it. It's in and out. It's pretty easy. It's 5 sentences of an intro. Maybe this took me 3 minutes. Maybe it took me 6. But the point is, I would use an adequate intro when I know I have to save time for my body paragraphs, and I can only pull this off in the allotted time. It's totally valid and fair if a lot of you say, I'm going to keep going this way. So the function is, I have a clear thesis as the last sentence of my intro. The function is, my position is extremely clear. And then the second function, I am clearly introducing and addressing the topic at hand. The value of exploring the unknown. Every single sentence here is my original thought, not College Board's thought during the prompt. And that's why this is adequate and not weak. Now we're going to talk about most effective creative openings. I'm going to be honest with you all. I've been teaching AP language for a while. I've been an AP reader for about 5 years. This is something that I have really emphasized a lot more in my AP classroom ever since going to my 2nd, 3rd, 4th year of reading all of the essays. Because I'm like, hey, why is it that I can only talk about, like, a week after the AP reading, I can only remember enough to talk about 3 to 4 essays a year? Every single time, those 3 or 4 essays earned the score of an 8 or a 9, and they had an introduction that followed this format. So I kind of like reverse engineered what effective writing can look like based on sample essays that I just scored. Sample essays that I saw that said, okay, these students are doing something unique, and this is a sign of great thinking and great writing. It's impressive what students can do in 40 minutes. So step 1, so like I said, I reverse engineered essentially just from looking at trends across several years of just reading, not my students, anonymous students writing. The best writers often did this for argumentation. So step one is a creative opening. So first, begin by discussing a topic that at the time seems unrelated to the prompt. And I'll show you an example of this so it's very concrete for you. But first I'll show you the steps. Second, by the end of your introduction, the topic will clearly become connected to the prompt. And then caution. When I started to really say, hey guys, try this in my classroom. Give this a shot. This is something that I've noticed works really well if you can pull it off. A lot of students it's like, oh, I know, I'll talk about cheesecake. Or, because it's so random, right? Or, I know, I'll talk about training dogs. Like the most random thing they can think of. That does not work if you don't have a plan for your creative opening. So sure, you're choosing something that seems unrelated to the topic, but you have a plan for connecting it. Connecting it's going to be step two, and so that's very straightforward where we're going, everybody. But creative opening, you get to have fun in writing an essay. My students love to do this. The hard part for them is doing it under a constrained time setting. It's hard to think on your feet like this. However, if you can pull it off, you are going to stand out. You will be one of the 1 to 5 essays that your reader remembers 5 days after the reading is over. Because they all sound the same. Yours can sound different. It's because of the creative opening that's going to sound different. Now, for me, using this topic, 2018 prompt about the unknown and the value of exploring the unknown, I chose to talk about awkward middle school dances. We've all been there, or we know people who have been there if we didn't go to those awkward middle school dances. But the point is, that does not seem like, when I think of the unknown, that's not the first thing I think of, right? I'm intentionally choosing something that doesn't seem to be related, obviously, because then it's my job as a writer to more effectively bridge the gap and say, hey, it's just like this. I'm essentially going to have an analogy going forward, relating awkward middle school dances to exploring the unknown. And you'll see how I pull it off in my sample intro today. So what I want you to do is say, okay, what's my thesis going to be? I have to start with what's my thesis, but then I backwards plan off of that. What random creative opening can I have that isn't random, that's actually really planned, but it seems random at the time. It's creative. No one else is talking about awkward middle school dances, and I guess that's where I want you to really latch onto. Write about something, the first few sentences of your essay, that nobody else is writing about. Let's pause and that's a really good way to think about it. There will be many other people saying the unknown can be a scary place. So that's why I'm saying it's kind of adequate. This is getting the job done, but it's not super original. And there will definitely be people, 9 out of 10, who just cite College Board's prompt. I want to write about something that nobody else is writing about. So for me, for this one, it was awkward middle school dances. I'm going to read you a couple sentences of my step one. This is actually what my first sentence or two of my essay would be. The awkward middle school dance has become a cliche in American society because it's such a universal experience. Teenage boys congregate on one side of the gymnasium floor while their female counterparts huddle together on the opposite side. I'm going to keep reading. The first 20 minutes of the dance seem to last forever. As lights low and music loud, both groups talk among themselves with intermittent, tense glances across the dance floor. At this point, the dance could turn in one of two directions. Each group could stay gender segregated, or a student could venture across the dance floor and into the unknown. So, there's my creative opening. I did not mention the word unknown until right there, right? So I've got this whole slide, that's 2 sentences, and then 2 more, a little more lengthy sentences. So this is a 4-sentence creative opening. I've got the unknown mentioned. So I have a purpose for talking about awkward middle school dance. But first I just talked about it, and my reader's saying, okay, I'm intrigued. Nobody else is talking about awkward middle school dance, but what the heck are you going to do with it? So the next step's going to be crucial. What do I do with my random creative opening in order to be effective? So this is what I call a bridge, like the end of step 1 getting into step 2. I still actually consider this step 1, my creative opening, and then I'll tell you transcribe, like this is my next step. So this is actually still part of my step 1. So launching off from into the unknown. The moment a boy or girl walks out of his or her respective gender bubble, all eyes are attracted to the brave soul. What will the night hold? Public rejection? The beginning of a lifelong romance? More often than not, the answer is somewhere in between. 2 students pair off and begin to dance in the middle of the gymnasium. So notice I mentioned the unknown, so my reader knows, okay, he's not going way off base here, but I don't rush into my thesis. I'm still talking about my creative opening. I just am making sure the reader knows, hey, I'm on topic here, trust me, just stick with me. Now step 2 is actually a crucial step. When I focus, I only have 3 steps here. Step 3 will be the thesis. Step 2 is the bridge. Step 1 is the creative opening. When I asked and encouraged my students to try this way, a lot of them skim over step 2. They spend all sorts of time in step 1 and have great openings, honestly. I love reading them. But they're not as effective as they will be by the end of the year, because it's really awesome creative opening, thesis. If there's not a clear bridge and purposeful connection to the thesis and therefore the topic, the creative opening is going to fall short. So it's actually a very important step. This is not the step that makes your creative opening jump out, or your introduction paragraph jump out to the reader and stand out, but it is a step that makes your writing effective. So if you just said, here's a lot of details about the Cheesecake Factory, and then here's a sentence about the unknown, my thesis, that's not going to work. Your reader will remember it in a bad way, right? So you want to say, hey, trust me, I'm in charge of the thinking and the reading here. Clearly, as for step 2, begin to shift the focus of the paragraph from your initial topic to your overall essay that directly answers the prompt. Use the language of the prompt to make this shift clear. Just when I say that, like just words like unknown for this prompt, clue into my reader, okay, they're on track. And then again, you must know where you're going. You cannot bridge to your thesis if you don't know what your thesis is going to say. That makes sense. Here's my step 2. Okay, let's just make sure we're launching into it. 2 students pair off and begin to dance in the middle of the gymnasium. Now my step 2. The tension immediately lifted. Couples quickly form, and the dance officially begins. The evening forever more enjoyable and memorable because of one awkward middle schooler's courage to choose the unknown. So I'm using that word to say, okay, I'm going somewhere with this, trust me. Although the stakes are admittedly low in a middle school dance, this is exactly what Anne Morrow Lindbergh means when she celebrates the unknown for all its disappointments and surprises. All right, so a quick side note here. Again, you don't have to mention Lindbergh, but if it's appropriate and you're not simply quoting her to quote her, it can work, right? So this definitely works here. I'm being clear that I'm talking about the exact topic. I've done a lot of thinking and writing for myself, but I'm making my reader know I am on point here, trust me. I will be talking about the unknown. And here's step 3, thesis. It's 1 sentence. So step 1 is going to be the longest step. Step 2 is going to be in the middle, and step 3 is the shortest step. It's exactly 1 sentence. It's the last sentence of your introduction paragraph in which you clearly and concisely state your position on the topic. You don't have to mention, in fact, you should not mention your creative opening in your thesis. Your creative opening is like an attention grabber. You bridge to your thesis, and then you just clearly, effectively write your thesis. Well, look at this. It's the exact same thesis we've been seeing all day. It's going to work really well because of the build-up to it. As Lindbergh suggests, exploring the unknown is not only enriching, it is necessary in order to advance as a society. So my side note on that is, again, you don't have to talk about Lindbergh or mention Lindbergh, but it worked well. But I have to make sure I'm building to it effectively. So that's in part in step 2 why I mentioned Lindbergh, because I'm bridging my random awkward middle school dance topic to my thesis statement. It's very clear here where I'm going. But I want to make a point about thesis statements. A lot of my students, if they're juniors or if they're seniors, come into me in AP language and say, hey, don't I have to list my main ideas? Because they're maybe I don't know, since 5th, 6th grade, that's what they were taught to do. And they were never taught that that was wrong. They were always taught, yeah, do that. That makes sense. And let me tell you, you can still do that, but it's not necessary. And sometimes because your ideas are going to be complex and nuanced, it's really impossible to list your main ideas effectively without being extra wordy. So I recommend not listing your main ideas. You're going to have 2 or 3 clear topic sentences that are clear claims that you're going to prove, and they're going to directly align with your thesis. But what I don't want is it to sound like a formula in terms of Lindbergh is correct because blank, blank, blank. And that's what a lot of thesis statements sound like. Lindbergh is wrong because X, Y, Z. I don't want it to be listy, listy, listy. I want it to be very thoughtful and nuanced. So let's read my thesis again. We've seen it a lot. As Lindbergh suggests, exploring the unknown is not only enriching, it is necessary in order to advance as a society. So maybe I would have one, there's a lot of ways I could organize here. Maybe I would have one body paragraph on the enriching elements of exploring the unknown. And then maybe I'd have 1 or 2 about the necessity of exploring the unknown. How in order to advance as a society, there needs to be people who explore the unknown. So I have a lot of ways that I can organize that. My claims can be clearer and more wordy, but for my thesis, I want to get straight to my point. What is my nuanced, thoughtful perspective? Here's where I want to push our thesis statement. This is just something to consider. Again, there's no bonus points for this. This is just something that I've noticed over time is super effective. Oh, excuse me, guys, hit the wrong button. So my optional thesis format is while blank or although blank, comma, blank. While X, comma, Y. So here's an example. Although venturing into the unknown can lead to treacherous results, it is how most societal progress has been made. Here's why. There's a couple reasons why I recommend at least thinking about or practicing with this format. The first is the least important reason, but I think it's worth mentioning. I talked at the beginning about the 5 components of effective argumentation writing, and one of those is effective writing style. Well, we're starting with a dependent clause. That's a clause that starts with while or although, for example. And then the independent clause would be after the comma. So by starting with the dependent clause, comma, independent clause, you're naturally varying up your sentence structure. Most of us write naturally with subject, verb, extra information, right? Whatever that is. This dependent clause, independent clause is just freeing us up or encouraging us or releasing us to vary up our sentence structure. But the second reason is probably the more important and impactful reason. This is encouraging nuance because I'm looking at it from multiple sides. Sure, there are treacherous results oftentimes when exploring the unknown. I'm conceding that, and I'm even acknowledging that, yeah, absolutely, that's true. But I'm emphasizing it must still be done. So a lot of you were with me through the rhetorical analysis unit in which we kept coming back to Ronald Reagan's speech the day of this Challenger explosion. We have a lot of background knowledge in that because we looked at that for weeks if you were with me. This might be a perfect example for this topic. So Ronald Reagan says pretty much what I'm saying in this thesis. Yes, today was a day of tragedy. Today was a day of treacherous results, but our society will move on knowing the results because progress must be made. That was essentially Ronald Reagan's thesis. I just want to push us to thinking about using this thesis statement because it's forcing us or encouraging us to think nuanced. Clearly, whoever's writing this is placing emphasis intentionally on the second half of the sentence, on the independent clause. So my thesis is it is necessary for societal progress. All right, now let's go to the slide. So this is what it looks like all together. I'm not going to read it all to you. My point here, though, is yes, this is longer, much longer than the adequate introduction that I showed you earlier. Now, you can absolutely use the adequate introduction and have an above adequate paper. You're going to make up for that in your body paragraphs. Come back next week. That is going to be the most important live session that we unpack. How do I write in the most effective body paragraph way possible? But take a look. If I can crank this out in 7 minutes, and that is an if, right? It's going to take practice and deliberate timing on your part throughout the year to get to this point. If I can pull this off in 7 or so minutes, that's a great use of my time. I promise you, nobody else talked about awkward middle school dances. Therefore, my essay is standing out. I want to pause here, and I actually do want to read a bit. I told you that as my students are practicing with this and kind of playing around with what does a creative opening actually look like, a lot of them spend all their capacity and time and thought on the creative opening, and then of course their thesis, because they know they can't get away with that, but they skip the very important step 2. If I don't have step 2, honestly, step 1's kind of useless, right? Step 2 is why step 1 is paid off. So without step 2, it's not really working. You might as well go to the adequate essay. So to be more clear about that, if you don't have a clear bridge between your creative opening and your thesis, it's going to be better to slash the creative opening and go back to the adequate introduction route. In other words, you're going back to the route where it's just, in your own words, giving some thoughts on the topic, introducing the topic, and then having a clear thesis. That's going to free you up to spend more time in your body paragraphs, but it's not going to be an effective introduction. It'll get the job done, though. That's why it's an adequate introduction. This is an effective introduction right here. But without step 2, I do not think this is effective. I'll read a little bit so you can see what I'm talking about. I'll start at this point of my creative opening, at this point. At this point, the dance could turn in one of 2 directions. Each group could stay gender segregated, or a student could venture across the dance floor and into the unknown. The moment a boy or girl walks out of his or her respective gender bubble, all eyes are attracted to the brave soul. What will the night hold? Public rejection? The beginning of a lifelong romance? More often than not, the answer is somewhere in between. As Lindbergh suggests, exploring the unknown is not only enriching, it is necessary in order to advance as a society. That was a pretty big jump, right? Let's look at that again. More often than not, the answer is somewhere in between. As Lindbergh suggests, exploring the unknown is not only enriching, that thesis is way out of place here. And you can't have a thesis that is out of place because your thesis is the place. Your thesis is the entire point of your introduction paragraph. You are building to your thesis throughout your entire introduction. So again, you can't just have a beautiful creative opening if you don't know why you're using it. So actually, I used the creative opening, awkward middle school dance, because I knew what step 2 would look like. Oh, I just blew up that to make the point. More often than not, the answer is somewhere in between, as Lindbergh suggests. Does not flow at all. Again, you might as well have an adequate introduction paragraph. In fact, an adequate paragraph would be better than this without step 2. I wanted to go the other way. Going back to the full introduction paragraph, I'm only talking about awkward middle school dance because I know how I'm going to bridge it to my thesis. Now, eventually, we will get to conclusions. And I want to take a live session talking about an effective argumentation conclusion. So a quick thing to file away until we get to that session, because it'll have to be in January. You are actually the best way to do a conclusion if you can pull off, here I'll go back to this one. If you can pull this off, is to slip back in the awkward middle school dance. You don't have to talk about it throughout your entire body paragraphs, but if you can slip that back into the conclusion, that's going to have it pay off even more. So it's just something to think about as we're going forward. I'll dedicate a live session to it in January, but if you can have a really strong creative opening, bridge to the thesis, awesome body paragraphs, and then a quick, effective conclusion that alludes back to the creative opening, you are going to be a very impressive writer, and you will be remembered for what you wrote. Now, here's my final reminders for the night. Introduction paragraphs allow you to set the tone for your essay, and they allow you to stand out to your reader. But most importantly, if it's adequate or if it's super effective, ensure that your position is clear. All about the thesis. You're just building up to your thesis. All right, so that is all I have for this live session. Again, next week we will be doing a body paragraph. That is the most hands down important session for argumentation. Now I've saved it for what I've done because we're building up to it. So it's expected that you've seen how do I not fall into the trap? How do I make sure I'm thinking through the best blend of evidence today? How am I effectively setting the tone, standing out? But then next week, how am I proving my point? And that's what it's all about. Everyone have a great week, and I will see you next time.